welcome back to Beyond the Ballot. I'm here with Noka Dakrub. Noka, we have a special candidate today. You may have heard him on News Talk Saga 960 every now and then. I'll let Noka introduce him.
Hello, everyone. Today we have a very special candidate who's running for mayor of Mississauga. Brian Crombie is with us today. He is a well-known Mississauga resident. He is the COO of Terra Cap Management. He's also the acting CFO for Sports Business. He's had 30 years of corporate experience, and he's done a lot of community work in Mississauga. So help us welcome Brian Crombie. Brian, hi, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you guys.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you for taking the time. So, Brian, tell us a little bit about why you decided to run for mayor.
So I posted this April Fool's joke back a little while ago saying I was going to run for mayor and that I was really quite dissatisfied with what was going on in Mississauga at the time. And I thought that there were, 4 different crises that we were facing and that not enough action was being taken from the existing council and the existing candidates. And I got so much support, comments back from that April Fool's joke that I said, maybe I should give it some thought and actually do it. And so I decided to do it. And I really think that we do have some issues. I think that Mississauga has frankly lost its way. I think that, we talked at least I tried to talk at the last couple of debates about how they've misled Mississauga residents about the tax increases. And I think that it's a confusing issue. And I worry that, frankly, some of the councillors don't understand this issue and they're fooling themselves, misleading themselves as well as people. But the tax increases are multiples of inflation rather than 2.3%, a modest increase, the way it was represented. And if you don't even understand the numbers, how can you ever actually get into the budget and really assess whether you're spending the right amount? I think that we've got a housing affordability crisis such that most youth are feeling lost. I think the statistic came out that 70% of people under the age of 40 have lost the Canadian dream, that they're going to be able to afford a home. And I think that's, it's not just bad, it's tragic. It's a tragedy if we had out migration in Ontario. 30,000 people left Ontario going to Alberta and elsewhere because of cheaper housing. And I think that it's because of municipal governments, red tape, regulation, delays, etc. Primarily, I think that there's some other issues as well, but I think it's primarily municipal city councilors that created the system that just doesn't work. And the OECD did analysis that said Canada was the worst, and then StatsCan and CMHC did analysis that said that Toronto, Mississauga, Victoria, and Vancouver are the worst cities in the worst country from a time to get approval standpoint. And, lots of people will tell you that it takes 5 to 7 years to get an approval for a development that only takes 2 to 3 years to build. It's atrocious. And so I think that that lack of supply caused by the red tape and regulation that's led to an incredible lack of affordability is a huge problem. I think that we've got a coming congestion crisis. It's sort of here, but it's going to come big time. And the example I keep trying to use, which people keep trying to quiet me down on, is that Brightwater is going to be between 10 and 15,000 people. Lakeview is going to be between 25 and 50,000 people, depending on whether the MZO that doubles the density goes through or not. They haven't added one lane of roadway, not one lane of roadway. They haven't added any transit to those 2 developments. If you're living on Mississauga Road, Lakeshore, Huron, Ontario, Cawthra, or Dixie, welcome to a complete disaster that's awaiting you. And you know what happens when those streets get congested? It spills onto, Stavebank, Ogden, etc. All those streets are going to be a complete disaster. And how the councillors in Ward 1 and Ward 2 that are running for mayor could allow that to actually be approved. And I think the developments are fantastic. Don't get me wrong. I think the developments are beautiful and the development of the waterfront is fantastic. But I chair, as you may know, an organization, a GTA-wide organization called Transit Alliance, where we talk about transit and development needing to go together. So there's a 25-acre development, the Mr. Christie site at Parkview and the QW that lots of people know. It's only 25 acres. You know what the provincial government's doing? Because it's going to be so congested there, they're actually building a new GO train station right there. Right? That's part of the whole development. We've got 75 acres at Brightwater. 75 acres is the size of Barcelona or the size of Rome. And it's going to be 10 to 15,000 people. We've got 120 acres sorry, did I say it's 75 acres in Brightwater, 120 acres in Lakeview, 25 to 50,000 people, not one extra lane. It's abysmal. And there are solutions. And I've talked about some of these solutions, but no one's talking about them. No one's demanding it. No one's trying to get it done. And then, at the meeting, 2 days ago or whatever it was, they started dreaming about bringing a subway to Dixie, which is a great idea. But what they haven't told you is the only way you get a subway to go to Vaughan is if you're going to have the density that the Vaughan Metro Center has. And that Vaughan Metro Center has 50 and 60-story towers. Or there's a subway being extended on Yonge Street to Richmond Hill, as you know. Yonge and Steeles is going to have 15,000 residents. It's going to have numerous different towers in a regional mall and then across the street and then in Richmond Hill north of Highway 7. Do you know what the height limit is? Proximate to the Dixie GO train station?
What is it?
12 stories.
Yeah.
It's laughable. For them to say, I'm going to go and demand a subway is lunacy, because Doug Ford, the Minister of Transportation, is going to say 12 stories, you might get a bus.
Yeah.
Right.
So Brian, what would you
make it 50 stories? Then then we've got a chance of bringing a subway. And the stupid thing about it is there's a developer that's got 16 towers planned for Cloverdale Mall, which is the East Mall. And what are they going to do? They're going to get the subway extended to East Mall. The subway's actually coming closer to our way, but we're not smart enough. We're not big thinking enough. We're not aggressive enough to actually, number one, understand the truth. Number two, tell the truth to our residents. And number three, to actually, lobby for and get it done. We've been talking about all day two-way go on the Milton Mississauga line for 50 years. There was a politician that I know that ran on it, 15 years ago. Nothing's happened. Actually, I stand corrected. I think 2 more trains have been added, 2 more in the morning, 2 in the evening.
Yeah. So Brian, what would you do differently? What would you do differently? Let's talk, one crisis at a time. What would you do differently about the housing crisis?
So I would aggressively look at our planning and approval process. And I think it needs to be cut down in time. And I'm not saying everything should get approved, but I think the review time period has got to be shortened dramatically, and the red tape has got to be shortened dramatically. I interviewed a construction manager last week, and he said he's working in Mississauga on a City of Mississauga sponsored project. He said he's never seen in his whole life red tape like he's seen in Mississauga. He says there's 11 different people that have to approve every change order. He says that they're doing the typical thing that civil servants do in trying to just spend the budget. And when he finds savings to get underneath the budget, they still want to spend the budget. His description of the process, it's laughable and sad at the same time. It's so bad. So, I think number one, you cut the time period for approval by 50%. Period, full stop. Number two, you've got to take the zoning and you got to look at what people are applying for and that's getting approved. And you got to change the zoning to allow most of the stuff that's going to get ultimately approved. Because if it's going to get approved anyway, why put them through the whole process of the zoning that takes an extra, a bunch of years? I had this example given to me by an architect the other day of one street in Mississauga where almost everyone applied for decks, but the decks weren't allowed. So everyone had to go to the Committee of Adjustment to ask for a minor amendment. Everyone got approved. Well, if you're going to allow decks on every house, just change the zoning to allow the decks so they don't have to go through the process of getting the minor amendment. So simplify the process, number one, and cut it in half. Number two, I think that what we got to do is think about what's really important to people in regards to density and height. Height is far less important than people think about. Every architect tells me that above 6 stories, people don't notice height. They don't know whether it's 10, 12, or 15 stories. They don't know it. So I would go to all the major transit nodes and I would give them another 20% density if half of that increase was affordable. So if someone got a 10-story condo approved or a rental apartment approved, I would increase it to 12, but one of those floors, or 8 to 10 suites, whatever that works out to be, have got to be at 80% of market rent, so affordable. Because I think we need 2 things. Number one, we need greater supply, just generally, so that all prices come down. And then number 2, we desperately need accommodation that is more affordable. So if someone got, in square one, a 50-story or a 60-story development approved, I'd give them that extra 10 or 12 floors if they wanted and they thought it was justifiable. But half of it, 5 or 6 stories, have got to be affordable.
When you say affordable, you're talking about subsidized housing.
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I think we need subsidized housing as well. The definition of affordable that's in the inclusivity, inclusive zoning regulations in both Mississauga and Toronto, and that the Ontario government is focused on, and that CMHC focuses on in all their financing, is 80% of market rents. And the idea is that someone that is making 80% of the median average income can spend 30% of that income and still afford to live there. And I think that's what you've got to do. So, I think that general supply is way too low. We're building as many homes today as we were built in the 1970s, and our population is, 2 point something greater. So that's crazy. So just general supply has got to increase. And then number two, we need to have some that are more affordable. Subsidized housing is a whole nother story that needs to be addressed as well. But I think we just need the affordable housing. And then I got to tell you, and you were there, Carolyn Parrish on Monday night recommended that her solution was to have a mayor's, council that would meet once a month with qualified developers that she knows and likes that would cut through the system. That's exactly the wrong thing. You don't want politics. You don't want favoritism. You don't want some people that have given to her charity or have taken her out for dinner to be the people that actually get to come through and cut the system. And the fact that she thinks that a mayor's got to come in and actually do that is proof that the system doesn't work the way it should work. And if the system doesn't work the way it should work, fix the system. Don't try to insert politics and favoritism in the process. That's what they do in countries that we don't want to go back to, rather than what should happen in Canada. So I think that we've got a major problem in affordability in Toronto, in Mississauga. Toronto, I think, is taking action. Mississauga's not. We haven't come to terms with it, and the people that don't want change don't realize that actually what's happening is the density in our single family neighborhoods is going down, because homes that used to have 5 and 6 people in them now have 1 or 2, because people are getting into their 50s, 60s, and 70s. They're empty nesters, and schools are being challenged for potential closure. Libraries, restaurants, our quality of life is going to be diminished unless we can do what we need to do, which is increase the population of Mississauga and do it such that people in their 20s and 30s get the dream of home ownership back again.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's certainly an issue, and I'll tell you, most of my own generation is struggling with that. Some of us have been lucky, but a lot of people are still struggling with being able to afford housing. The
only people that can afford housing are the ones that get a big gift from mom and dad or somewhere else. I do okay. My kids do okay. My kids, they do okay.
Yeah.
They can't afford a house.
Yeah.
2 good incomes. They can't afford a house in Mississauga.
It's just not possible.
And the reality is the rents are so high that they can't afford to save for a down payment. And, when I graduated, it was a different world. You could buy a house for 3 to 5 times. You could afford a mortgage at 3 times your salary, and you could buy a house at 4 to 5 times your salary. That doesn't exist today. Now it's 20 times. It is wrong. It's unethical. It is an intergenerational inequity such that we are the first generation in history that are giving to our kids a worse future than we were given by our forefathers. And
the scary part, the very, very scary part for me is, what kind of society are we going to be in 20 years, where you have people who either inherit property and people who will never own property, because that's the only way to get into the market. But thank you for sharing your perspective on housing.
Brian, you mentioned something about the tax rate being not exactly what council is saying it is. Tell us a little bit about what your problem is with what council is saying, what the tax rate increases, etc., and what do you plan on doing? We have about 4 or 5 minutes each.
So if you're at all interested in this topic, and I think it's one of the critical topics, and I'm shocked that frankly media haven't picked it up. I've got a show on my website that I did on my nightly show on Saga 960, 6 o'clock every night this past Monday, with two members of Mayornet that walked me through the analysis, and I've checked their numbers in detail. What the Mississauga Council, Mayor, and administration do is they announce the tax increase this past year at a modest 2.3% increase. But the way they do it is they take the Mississauga tax increase and they divide it by the Mississauga taxes and the Peel taxes, which is effectively dividing it by a denominator that is twice as large. So clearly it ends up being a smaller number. Then they take the Peel increase and divide it by the Mississauga taxes and the Peel taxes. And it ends up being 2.3% and 4.5%. That ends up being over 7%. The real tax increase, if you took the Mississauga tax increase and divided by the Mississauga taxes, you would get 6.3%. If you divided the Peel tax increase by the Peel taxes, you would get 8.4%. And the blend of them together is the same 7.4. No one in this world would take the way they've done it and add them together to get the tax increase. It would be like saying, Ontario saying, you know what, we didn't have a 5% tax increase. We only had a 2.5% tax increase, because when we take our taxes, we divide it by both what Ontario's taxing as well as what the federal government is taxing. And our taxes are only 2.5% of the full amount of the tax increase you're going to get. And the federal government's tax increase is another 2.5%, and it's 5% altogether, which is bull. You know it, because it's 5% on one and 5% on the other, and it's 5% altogether. And the worst thing is, even though these councillors have been told this, and even though people have written emails that you've probably seen that have gone to them and they've been told it at the debate stage, they still stand up and say, well, we had a modest 2.3% tax increase. 6.3% is not modest. 6.3 is 2 to 3, maybe it's not quite 3, but it's 2.5 times inflation. When you're increasing your tax rate, your taxes at 2 times inflation, you're out of control. And you take that 7.5% tax increase, it was 8 point something last year. Number one, remember, Toronto had a 10% tax increase, and everyone, oh, 10% tax increase in Toronto. We're almost as bad as that. If you take that over 10 years, and it's easy math, 1.075 to the power of 10, anyone can do that. You know what you get? A doubling. Your taxes are going to double in 10 years. You think Mississauga is unaffordable today? With the current councillors in charge, we are going to become unbelievably unaffordable in the future. I think what you need is a business person to go in and shake things up. I think what you need is someone that actually understands numbers to go in and shake things up. You have got way too many career politicians that don't understand what they're doing, don't understand budgets, mislead the public, and probably, frankly, mislead themselves, that are in control of things. And it's wrong. It's the old adage that Einstein talked about. Do the same thing. The definition of insanity is do the same thing over and over and over again and expect a different result. The other line I've used a couple of times, you probably heard me say, is I think this is the Titanic, and all we're doing is rearranging the deck chairs. And we are going to end up a couple of years from now with taxes that have gone up by 7% a year, 8% a year. We're going to end up with no dramatic increase in housing. What did we do? We did 10% of the housing starts as a percentage of the provincial allotment. We're not meeting anywhere close to what the province has asked us to do. And we're not going to. And you know what? The worst thing about this whole thing is, I think Hazel McCallion, the former mayor, she had vision that Mississauga could be something great. You know, the Living Arts Center, Square One, and what was built around, downtown, the Hershey Center that's now the Paramount Center. She had this vision that Mississauga could be a great, wonderful city. I don't hear people talking about that anymore. I think we've lost our vision. We've lost our desire for big ideas. I'm really disappointed with where Mississauga is today, and I think I can change it.
Well, thank you for that. Speaking of taxes and paying the bills, we're going to do just that. Take a quick break, hear a few commercials. We'll be right back with more Beyond the Ballot here with Ryan Anoka and Brian Crombie. Stay tuned to News Talk Saga 960 AM.
You're listening to Beyond the Ballot with Ryan Gercharn and Noka Dukrub.
welcome back to Beyond the Ballot. If you're just joining us, you missed an incredible first segment of Brian Crombie, mayoral candidate for this by-election that's happening. I'm really diving into, very passionately, might I add, about housing in Mississauga, the lack of vision, what he sees wrong with our tax, or how our councillors are talking about taxes right now. And there's so many other issues that you've mentioned, Brian. I just want to start off with, I've known you since I think it was the Western GTA Summit. It was on transit. It was a transit summit. And I think you were spearheading that.
So Hazel, former Mayor Hazel McCallion in 2007 asked me to co-found and chair something called the Mississauga City Summit. At the time, John Tory, unelected at the time, was chairing with David Pico, the Toronto City Summit. And she was jealous. She said that, you've got a bunch of citizens very involved in fashioning what, a better city would be like in Toronto. We need that in Mississauga. So she asked Shelley White, who was at the time the CEO of the United Way, and myself to co-found and co-chair a summit. It went on for 7 years. We had numerous different task forces. And, some of the people that were, chairing of the task forces that we had really have become critically important people. I asked Jim Tovey, who was at the time just president of the Lakeview Residents Association, to chair a waterfront task force with Michael Spaziani, an architect, urban planner down in Mississauga, and John Dancy, a landscape architect. And the three of them went on, Jim Tovey to join council and regrettably, obviously, pass away, but to the other two and him to really transform Lakeview and what was going on. Sharif El-Sabaweh, who's now an MPP, was one of the co-chairs of our post-secondary education task force. And I could go on. Joe Harnick was on our, who's a city councilor, was a co-chair of the transit task force. So we had a great organization. We met about once a month. Our task forces met more often than that. I met every second week with former Mayor Hazel McCallion for breakfast, and we talked about what we were doing, what we were talking about. In 2009, I think maybe it was 10, I can't remember. The economy was devastated with the Great Recession, as we may remember. And Hazel and I went out for breakfast, and she said, "Brian, this is devastating. Joblessness is going up dramatically, and one of the problems is the joblessness is in the 30% range for young people, and we need to do something about it." And we had a job summit. And then a year after that, we ended up doing the Western GTA Summit. And it was the first and best time that Mississauga, Brampton, Caledon, Oakville, Burlington, Halton Hills, Milton got together to talk about the keys. We had over 1,000 people at the Mississauga Convention Center talking about the future of Mississauga. And it was fun. Our logo was "The West Wants In." We copied Preston Manning's pitch. And it was fantastic. And then someone who at the time I was connected to ended up getting elected mayor. And so I wanted to step back from that position as chair of the summit, but I got involved in the Arts Council. And I spent 7 years on the board of the Mississauga Arts Council, 2 years as president. And so I've been very involved. And I don't know if you know, Ryan, but my very first job when I graduated from my master's, worked for the Walt Disney Company in Los Angeles, planning master plan communities and developments in Southern California and in Central Florida. And not just amusement parks, hotel developments, retail entertainment, downtown Disney, all that kind of stuff. I traveled around North America, interviewing and getting lessons on building what people thought were great cities. It was incredible. I worked for the Molson companies, and I was the individual responsible for developing the Molson Center, now called the Bell Center, in downtown Montreal, and planning it, financing it, and getting zoning for and approvals for 5 towers that are around the Molson Center, and revitalizing that part of Montreal. And then I spent about 20 years off and on working for Eugene Melnick, the owner of the Ottawa Senators. I was the person that did the purchase for him. He signed the check and gets all the credit, but I did all the work in doing that deal. And spent about 5 years working with the National Capital Commission, the province of Ontario, and the city of Ottawa in planning, which regrettably didn't go ahead, a 53-acre development in downtown Ottawa. There's going to be a new arena and a big development. So I've built or tried to build great cities. I've learned from some of the most successful people in North America about how you build great cities. And I think we've lost that in Mississauga. Can I give you 3 examples?
Yeah, absolutely.
We have an 18-acre piece of property with a 150,000 square foot warehouse on it, owned by the federal government, 1 Port Street in Port Credit. sticks out into the lake. You know what it is used for now? Storing boats and bird stuff. That's what it does.
Yeah.
If you had that in downtown Toronto, you know what it would be? It would be the St. Lawrence Market. If you had it in Vancouver, what would it be? It would be Granville Island Farmers Market and a huge art and culture development. In New York, it'd be South Street Seaport. In San Francisco, it'd be Fisherman's Wharf. In Seattle, there are 18 cities in North America today building retail entertainment on the waterfront because they see it as what people want. You know what our federal government's going to do right now? Because our city hasn't requested or demanded them to do anything different, they're going to put up 8 condos. We don't need 8 more condos in Port Credit. I'm sorry. But a retail entertainment that would be a place that you would love to go to, that would be alive with farmers market and retail. Think about Queens Quay or the St. Lawrence Market, or if you've ever had the pleasure of going to Granville Island, Barrie's building one. Collingwood's building one. Wasaga's trying to build one. How come we're not building that? And the fact that, that dream is there, that possibility is there, and we've done nothing about it, it's shocking. Number 2, you ever been to Riverwood or Arundel? Riverwood, Arundel, and the Pinchin Farms all together are 551 acres. It is the 3rd largest urban park in all of North America. Think about how important Stanley Park is to Vancouver, or how important Central Park is to Manhattan. You can't think about New York without thinking about Central Park. This park is called, it brags on its website, the Hidden Gem. Why? Because we're not managing together. We're not programming it. We're not putting the things in it that make it alive and vibrant and a place that attracts people. It could and should be the Central Park of Mississauga. It should be Mississauga Central Park. It should be the place where the first thing you think about, maybe the second, when you bring people to Mississauga is, I got to go to Mississauga Central Park because it's spectacular. What makes it alive in New York or in Stanley Park? It's a great place where you want to do the seawall or the running path, or the lawn where there's concerts, or the zoo, or the skating rink, or the Metropolitan Museum of Art. There are things that you put there that make it the place to be. And we've squandered that opportunity. I'll give you number 3, 120 acres, Britannia Farms. It's right on here, Ontario. It was gifted to the province of Ontario for educational purposes, and so therefore the Board of Education takes it up. If you walk up the Little Etobicoke Creek and you get to the Britannia Farms at Bristol, you know what you are fronted by? Chain link fence and barbed wire. You're not even allowed into it. There's a working farm in there. There is a maple, a sugaring off tree stand. It used to be a working farm. You could have Riverdale Zoo. You could have Black Creek Fire Village. You could have a Markham, type fairgrounds right there in here, Ontario, with an LRT so people could get to it. 57% of the people in Mississauga have lived in Canada for less than 10 years. They don't know what the heritage is of Mississauga or of Southwestern Ontario, of the rural farm. It's right there, but we don't let anyone on it or see it. Where did the big ideas go for building a great Mississauga? And I could go on. Let me give you another one. Do you know Lakeview is a real problem? 25 to 50,000 people. It's going to be spectacular, but it's not going to get built because, number one, the economics don't justify it right now. But the other thing is there's no transit to it. And there's no talking about transit that goes to it. But do you know what went to the old coal plant? It was a railway track, because coal went to there. There is a railway track and a railway right-of-way that goes right from Lakeview up on a right-of-way to the Lakeshore line, and it merges in just before Long Branch. You could have a train that goes from Lakeview to Long Branch, a shuttle. But you know what, even more than that? Metrolinx already owns another railway branch that goes from the east side of Long Branch up to the Kipling Go and merges in with the Kipling, the Milton Mississauga line at Kipling. You could have a train going from Lakeview to Long Branch to Kipling, and then it could stop, or it could go downtown, or it could go across the city. You could turn Lakeview from a place with the worst transit that you could ever imagine into the best. But no one's got the vision. No one's got the big ideas. No one's got that. I love that attitude we have with the Olympic Games of own the podium. Where's that swagger, that attitude gone in Mississauga? We've lost it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? There is a lot of work that needs to be done on transportation in Mississauga. Tell us a little bit about how you would improve overall the transportation system in Mississauga.
So the Milton Mississauga line was studied back 10 years ago by the Big Move, by the Places to Grow, and by the Neptis Foundation. They all studied it. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm chairman of a group called Transit Alliance. So I've been through this studies. It has an 8-to-1 benefit to cost ratio if it goes all day, two-way frequent GO train service. 8-to-1 is astronomical. Most transit services are 2 to 3 times benefit to cost. And some of them, like the Scarborough Extension and the Shepherd Subway, are actually not even, the costs don't equal the benefits don't equal the cost. It's got a less than 1 benefit to cost ratio. This one is unbelievable. The lead transportation consultant to the Neptis Foundation that then ended up working for Metrolink, saying any other country, any other city in the world would build this as a slam dunk. It is the best transit you could ever imagine. And the reason why is a couplefold. Number one, there's a whole bunch of people in Mississauga that travel to Toronto for jobs. Number two, they go there for, social times, sports, entertainment, and other activities. And number two, the catchment area is very wide. So you think about the Lakeshore line, the catchment area is actually limited by the lake on one side of it. So when you think about people will only drive or go a certain distance, the Lakeshore line is actually diminished by the fact that it's half of the diameter is cut off. The Milton Mississauga line, as you probably know, goes on a diagonal right through Mississauga. So it's actually very convenient. If we don't do this, at one point in time, the Neptis Foundation said we'd have to double deck the Gardiner if people were going to get to the jobs. That's never going to happen. You know that. And so the congestion is just going to get terrible. And let me take you one step farther. If you actually maybe added 1 or 2 more stops, maybe one at Cawthra, the GO train crosses Dundas right at Cawthra, as you may know, right by a lumber store. And maybe another one at Mavis, because it crosses Mavis just north of Dundas. If you had those stops and it was every half an hour, every 15-minute service, it would be like you had a surface subway. It would be like the smart tracks that John Tory talked about, but they decided they didn't need smart tracks because they had a subway, so it was duplicated. We don't have a subway, so it's not duplicating the service. What does it take? What does it take is either another line to be built on that right-of-way beside the lines that are there, or taking the dangerous goods and the freight traffic out of going through Mississauga and Toronto. And I come back to an argument I made on numerous occasions. We don't get up and demand. What happened in Lake Megantic? The people and the mayor demanded, get dangerous goods out of Lake Megantic because we don't want another spill. What did the mayor of Calgary, Nenshi, do when there was a spill in Calgary? He demanded and got a diversion around Calgary because he says, I don't want dangerous goods and freight going through Calgary. People say, well, it's not going to happen. 1978 was the largest evacuation in peacetime in Canadian history because we had a spill at Mavis and just north of Dundas. The dangerous goods should not be traveling right through Mississauga and Toronto. It goes right through, the Annex and Forest Hill, etc. I don't know why we haven't complained. And there is an opportunity to move it up to the CP line that's north of the 407. There is a way to the CN line. There's a way to get it out. So there's 2 different ways of solving this problem. As soon as you get those lines, just like we got the Lakeshore lines, you could have all day 2-way frequent service. Do you know what happened when they went from every hour to every half-hour service on Lakeshore? You'd think, oh, we've doubled the schedule. We just split it all up, and every train would be half as filled. No, demand went up. There's this concept in transportation called the S curve. When you increase supply, frequency of service, you get an exponential increase. And the secret is when you know there's a train or a subway or a bus coming soon enough that you don't even bother looking for the schedule, that's when you've got sort of the perfect scenario. And the subway in Toronto, do you look and wait for a schedule to see when it's coming? No, you just walk down and you get on the subway because it's going to come. You know what? If you miss that last GO train to Milton, you're taking a $60 or $100 Uber ride home. Yeah. And so if you think you're going to a hockey game, or you think you're going to stay late to go for drinks with a buddy, or you think that, you might have to stay late at work, you drive. Because the last thing you can do is miss that last GO train. It just doesn't work the way it's done. What we've got is not a passenger rail system on the Milton Mississauga line. We got a freight rail system. We pack them in the morning, we shove them downtown, we pack them in the evening and bring them back, instead of what we should have, which is a passenger rail system. So I think that is the biggest change you could have. And if we had effectively a surface subway in Mississauga, which is right there, I think it would be spectacular. And people that are talking about an LRT on Dundas instead of here in Ontario, yeah, it'd be nice. But you know what? No business person, no one that's got a job downtown is going to take an LRT from Mavis or Huron, Ontario 20 stops to Kipling, and then 20 stops on the subway to get downtown. The GO train is a express system. I'll give you one last comment on that if I could. Do you know what the most successful subway system in North America is? One line. It's the 7th Avenue in New York. There's something like 40 stops between Harlem and Wall Street on the 7th Avenue subway in New York. No one would take 40 stops because that's 40 minutes just in the stops. But there's an express beside it. So everyone gets on the local, transfers to the express, takes the express, either gets off or gets on the local. The express has 7 stops between Harlem and Wall Street. The GO train is like the express. From Dixie, it's 19 minutes to downtown. It's like 25 from Arundel. It's the express. We've got the express, and too many people are talking about building a local. We don't need a local. We need the express. And the nice thing about the express is it stops at Kipling, so you can get on the local. It should stop, doesn't yet, but it's going to stop at Dundas Bloor, so you can get on the local or get on the UP Express to go to Pearson. So I think that all-day two-way frequent GO train service on the Milton Mississauga line is a game changer for Mississauga.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And Brian, tell us what makes you stand out from other candidates. What's your elevator pitch?
My elevator pitch is I'm something new and different. I'm a business person that for the last 40 years been involved in business. I've worked for the Walt Disney Company and in Los Angeles and Florida, designing master plan communities. I've worked for the Molson companies and designing redevelopments right across Canada. I have been in business. I've cut budgets. I've looked at meeting payroll. I've done the work that business people do. I remember sitting down with one of you, telling you when you were thinking about running for politics at one point in time, you've got an incredible future. You've got all it takes to be unbelievably successful, but go out and get some business experience first. You didn't listen to me, but that was my advice to you.
I did. I started my own practice now.
I remember having that conversation with you because I think it's critically important. And I think what you've got right now, my competitors running that, are the leading candidates, regrettably, are all incumbents that are all career politicians that are going to be doing the same thing they've done. And, if they haven't fixed things up when they've been there with the influence and power and ability to fix things up now, how can you believe that they're going to fix it up in the future? They're misrepresenting the tax increases because I don't think they understand it and know it. They part of the problem of the red tape and regulation and the planning affordability. They haven't been espousing big ideas. You need someone new. You know what? I have Bob McCowan on my show tonight on Saga 960, and he talked about the only solution for the Leafs is shake it up. Fire the coach, fire the general manager, maybe even the president. You got to shake it up. In business, you shake it up. In sports, you shake it up. Why in politics do we go just with whoever name we know and who's got the organization and hands out too many pamphlets and puts up signs? You know what we should do is we should think about shaking it up. You need someone new. You need some change. Mississauga could be the most spectacular city on the Great Lakes with an incredible waterfront, the third largest urban park in all of North America, with a beautiful something or other on Huron, Ontario, with the second largest employment zone in all of Canada. Think about it. From Pearson to Pill Hill is the second largest employment zone after downtown Toronto in all of Canada. If it was in Kitchener-Waterloo, we'd have the federal government giving us money to have a super incubator, a super cluster. We're multiples of the size of the super cluster that's in Atlantic Canada or in Western Canada. We've got some of the best high-tech, biotech, aeronautics companies in the world. We've got more patents than anywhere other than along University Avenue in downtown Toronto. We've got lack of attention to it. We've got lack of focus on it. We don't incubate it. We don't strive to make it the success that it is. And that is the high-paying jobs in the future that I want for my kids and for the balance of people in Mississauga. That's the commercial tax base that's going to keep our taxes low. That's the vibrancy that's going to make Mississauga spectacular. But we don't have transit that goes there. We don't have a BIA or a Board of Trade for it. And we haven't striven. What's the word? We haven't, tried to strive. We haven't striven, whatever the word is. We haven't done what it takes to make it great. And believe me, if you were Kitchener-Waterloo,
Okay.
You would do
Brian,
something a lot more.
You're filled with a lot of big ideas. In fact, you should call yourself the Big Idea Brian. And it was great chatting with you. Thanks for sharing a lot of those thoughts.
But Brian, what's wrong with big ideas? We need big ideas.
Nothing at all. But what is wrong
You gotta
is that
strive
if
for
you
the
want to hear
stars.
more, you can visit briancrombie.ca and hear more about his platform. We got to take a break. Thank you so much, Brian, for joining us.
Thank you, guys.
Us.
Really appreciate it.
Stay tuned right here on News Talk Saga 960 AM.